Hi, I'm Mark from Paul Davis Restoration, and we're here at a home that has been damaged by the Hurricane Sandy floods. Flood damage is very serious, and we'd like to show you today the type of damage that results from floodwater and the proper techniques to repair this damage. Floodwaters are considered Category 3 waters, essentially the same as sewage. And if you look at the floor, can we see the floor here? You can see all of the sludge on the floor. This floodwater is highly pathogenic, and we have to take great care to restore the home correctly so that there are no health risks in the future to the occupants. Now, as we go downstairs, you'll see what happened here, down here in the basement. So when we come in the house to inspect for water damage, flood damage, we want to find out how high the floods went and what materials are contaminated. So we come down to the lowest level, that's the basement. As you can see here, the floor is full of mud. We can see the boiler is severely damaged, so this was clearly underwater. This is heavy corrosion from the salt water. And over here, if you can see it on camera, you can see a water line right here. So we know that this was the height of the water. If we look up here, you follow it up here, and you see that it came above the first level floor 6 to 8 inches. That's very important for us to know for correcting the problem and ensuring there are no future health risks. So now we know there was close to 4 feet of water in the basement. And we know, again, here's evidence of how high the water line was in the upper level. So we know the high water mark was about here, but we expect the danger zone to be higher because water wicks up in drywall. So we want to find out how high the drywall has been contaminated. And we do that with an instrument called a moisture meter. And I'd like my field supervisor, Freddie, to use the moisture meter to check this wall and see where it's dry. Start at the top, Freddie. And then see where the moisture came up to. So if you hear that pinging noise, that's where the drywall has elevated moisture. Okay, I'd like to introduce Paul Gresson from Professional Building Inspectors. Thank you for coming, Paul.
Glad to be here.
Paul's one of the environmental leaders on Long Island, an industrial hygienist, and I wanted Paul to tell us some of the dangers of flood damage. So Paul, we see the danger zones this high. Just to start with, what are the risks of floodwater in a house?
In this particular flood, you had salt water, so you have all of the phytoplankton and all of the other organisms that are in salt water. You have sewage, so there's a huge food source. You have water feeding it. Molds grow on paper, and of course the covering of sheetrock is paper. So you have all these contaminants coming in. Mold is known as a trigger for asthma and other respiratory problems. You can also end up with eye infections, respiratory infections, and skin rashes.
Sounds like bad stuff, Paul.
It is bad stuff.
Okay, so what would you expect to find when we open this wall?
Well, with your permission, let me go and show you what I think we're going to find.
Okay.
I'm going to go to an area by the front hall closet where the owner has their property. Mark, let me show you what I was talking about. This is right by the front door where water would have come in. Mm-hmm. And of course, water is going to seek its own level throughout the house. So this is a really good barometer. And if you look in here, I'm going to move the vacuum out of the way. And you can see literally water spilling out of the vacuum. Now, that is what I would expect to find in the wall. That's actual visible mold growth. Mm-hmm. Now, it's at the height of where the water was, but you can see now that the mold is actually growing higher into that wicking area. We know from using the instrument before that the water table was up to here in the house. Mm-hmm. But now we were talking about that danger zone higher than the water table, mm-hmm. and why the remediation has to go into what the average homeowner thinks is a perfectly good area. Well, it's really not, because now we can see the mold breaking through all the way up. And this is going to actually come up to about this high. Mm-hmm. So here, we want to take the highest high tide mark and go up, so we know this would be the high tide about here. We want to go up 24 inches above where the standing water was. So we're going to be actually up somewhere around here. And when we open up the wall, because we have trapped humidity in the wall that can't get out, we're going to see, what we see here is going to be worse in the wall. And then also, we have the wood floor that's exposed under that. So not only do we have the mold in the wall, but we're going to have to deal with the mold contamination in the floor, in the subfloor, in all of those different areas. So it's possible that this whole section is going to have to be removed.
So now I have Paul, and this is Freddie, who did the moisture test before. He's our field technician who leads the jobs to restore homes like this. So Freddie, you know the extent of damage. We have the water damage throughout the first floor. We have to cut out walls and other activity to remediate the damaged materials. How would you start this job?
I would actually prep the house first to prevent any secondary damage. Upstairs we have an unaffected area. What I would do is would set up 6mm polyplastic right here to prevent any mold spores from contaminating the unaffected area of the house, as well as set up a negative pressure, which makes the house into a vacuum, basically. So what it would just bring down the dust, shoot all the mold spores and dust outside the window.
Okay, there's a machine for that. Paul, would you like to tell us what that machine is and whether what Freddie said is what we should be doing?
Now, Freddie's right on target. He's been doing this for a while. Negative air will control the airflow in the building. We keep the bad stuff where we want it and don't allow it to go where we don't want it to go. That's a great idea. The curtain is what's necessary to stop contamination from getting worse upstairs. And then once the environment is controlled, which is what Freddie's doing, at that point you can start breaking walls and doing ripping. But absolutely none of that until Freddie's initial layout of controlling airflow, controlling where the dirt's going to go is completed.
People who know what happened with Sandy, we didn't have electricity here for 2 weeks, and the boilers are all damaged. No houses have heat, yet we're trying to dry them. How do we do that with the low temperature? It's now November, it's probably 45 degrees out at night. The refrigerant dehumidifiers can't dry down to that low temperature. Is there another technique?
There is. Then you bring in desiccant systems, which is, you know the little packet you get with drugs and little thing says you always wondered why it was in the bottle? Well, that's a desiccant, and it's designed to draw moisture out of the air. Well, on a commercial level, we do the same thing. We bring in desiccant machines that are not dependent on the temperature in the house, and we can still affect drying.
Okay.
So that would be the way to go.
Do we have a desiccant to put in here, Freddie?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, in a little while, we're going to move forward with the remediation. Paul, thank you very much for your insights.
pleasure.
Freddie, you got a lot more work to do today, and we'll move on to that shortly.